Behind the Attic Wall by Sylvia Cassedy, Chapter 13. Where is the parasol? Maggie heard early one morning, when her head was still heavy and only a deep gray light edged her window curtain. The voice was loud and clear, and Maggie sat up listening. The green silk parasol for the garden. I never remember where I put it. Help me find it, the voice commanded. Commanded her, Maggie thought, and she slipped out of bed and opened the door into the dark hallway. Help me look. Okay, Maggie said, and she advanced down the hall. It can't be there. I never leave it there. Then where? Maggie cried. Where should I look? Her words rang shrill and trembling along the hall. Where? A bedroom door opened. What's going on here? Maggie jumped, startled, and faced Aunt Harriet, standing in her doorway. What are you doing here, waking everybody up? Aunt Harriet spoke in an angry whisper, and her hair rolled into pink plastic sausages, bounced with every word. In another moment, a second door opened, and Aunt Lillian was in the hallway, shivering slightly in her nightgown, her hair hanging like trailing weeds around her shoulders. Who's shouting? What is all this? What are you doing here, Maggie? I'm looking for something. What are you looking for at 5 o'clock in the morning? A parrot. Nothing. My handkerchief. I lost it. Get back to your room. You don't have a handkerchief. And the two bedroom doors closed with little quiet clicks. Here it is, she heard as she returned to her room. Ah, of course, under the chair where I left it. They hadn't been commanding her at all. Whoever they were, they didn't even know she was there. They spoke only to each other, and she just listened in, as though some crossed wires exposed a distant telephone conversation to her ear. By then, the voices spoke every day, and Maggie drifted slowly into their world. She had given up trying to locate them, or even find an explanation for them. They had become somehow part of the house, like the gray, feathered wallpaper in the parlor, except that they belonged to her, and she listened to them as she listened to voices in a dream. She had learned finally to distinguish between them. There were in fact only two, a man's and a woman's. The kettle needs scouring, the woman's voice was speaking, and Maggie stopped on the stairway, imagining a tarnished kettle with a battered spout hissing on a stove in some far-off room she had never even seen. Did you remember to water the roses? The man's voice this time, and Maggie pictured a bed of roses abloom in some other garden. Water them, she urged. She urged no one, someone. Water them before they all die. The dog will want to go out, she heard, and she created a picture in her head of an impatient dog, brown maybe, with a white tail, scratching at some faraway door. Let him out, she thought. Open the door. Where was it? Where was the door? Where were the kettle and the rose garden? Where was the dog? Where were the people who spoke? How soon before we should call her? Maggie was in an upstairs hall. Call who, she wondered. Me? We want to make sure she is the right one. What if we make a mistake? The right one. Somebody had said that to her once. You're the right one. Something like that. She couldn't remember who. We won't make a mistake. Let's call her soon. Call who? Maggie said aloud. We will call her as soon as we are certain. Call who? Maggie repeated into the hall. There's still a lot to do. Everything takes so long. Answer me! Another voice, different this time. Answer when I call you! Stop staring like that! Answer me! Call who? Maggie asked, and then, from behind the wall, undo these buttons. Look at me! The other voice again. I've been calling you for 5 minutes! Call who? Maggie asked louder still. Me? She felt a sharp sting across her cheek before she realized what it was. Aunt Harriet was standing in front of her, her face angry and red, her hand hanging limply in the air. Stop being rude! She shouted. Maggie hadn't heard her shout before, and her voice sounded funny. Why did you make me come Why did you make me come all the way upstairs to find you? She was out of breath, and her words came in little spurts. Why didn't you answer when I called? I didn't hear you, Maggie answered. I thought it was somebody else. I will not tolerate rudeness, Aunt Harriet went on. Go to your room and make your bed. You've forgotten again, and stop sucking your hair. Maggie rubbed her cheek. Neither aunt had ever slapped her before, and the idea of it, along with the force of the blow, made her dizzy. She rested her head against the wall. The voices, the other ones, had stopped now, and all she could hear was her aunt moving quickly, more quickly than usual, down the stairs. Call who? She wondered again as she drifted back to her room. Me? "Look," she said to the Backwoods girls. "See this? This window? Watch what happens when I turn the handle." "Oh, how wonderful!" they answered as the window slowly swung open. "Let me try. Let me, let me, let me." "No," Maggie answered. "You'd only break it." And she stretched her body far out into the open air. Beneath her the lawn rippled like a snakeskin in the sun. The chrysanthemums blazed yellow and gold in their beds, and a spear of light bouncing off the blade of a hoe stung her eyes. To her right, the remaining pale leaves on the birch tree quivered, like shells on a wind chime. "Oh, how far you're leaning out!" the 5 girls cried. "You'll fall!" "No, I won't." "But don't you try it," Maggie cautioned, and she reached out farther still. "Oh, how high we are!" the girls exclaimed, crowding around her. Suddenly Maggie saw something move among the shadows of the birches. She twisted her body around to get a better look. Someone was sitting against the trunk of one of the trees. A pair of legs moved, and now an arm. The Backwoods girls fell back as Maggie gazed into the afternoon light. Who was it? Who was invading her trees, shattering her shadows, sitting in her little kitchen all laid out with sticks? All at once something silver flashed. The knob of a walking stick. It was Uncle Morris's, and a moment later she saw the half-moon of his black hat against the white bark. There had been a time when she almost wanted Uncle Morris to visit again, but now at the sight of his hat against the birches, her birches, she grew impatient and angry. "Go away!" she cried out. "Those are my trees!" But he didn't hear. His legs remained stretched out on the lawn, and the bowler was a stationary blot on the bark. "Go away!" she snapped instead at the Backwoods girls, and in an instant she was alone in her silent room. She crossed to the mirror and stared at the 3 pink streaks staining her cheeks. Aunt Harriet's slap. Call who? She wondered again. The voices were quiet now, and she returned to the window seat. Her eye wandered back and forth across the garden, coming to rest finally on the birch trees and on Uncle Morris, who sat beneath them. She looked at him for a long time before it finally and suddenly came to her that it was he who had said something about being the right one. "I think you are the right one after all," he had said. It was on the day she arrived in the dining room. Right one for what? And that's the end of chapter 13.